None of us are born winners, and none of us are born losers, but we're all born choosers, and with choices come consequences. That is so true. God didn't create puppets. He had a plan. He wanted a relationship between Adam and Eve, and they blew it. They started doing what they wanted to do. So that trickled down to society, that we're all sinners when we're born, but there's choices you make all the time. Just meaningless little is what kind of toothpaste you're going to use, and then, do I have surgery for this cancer, or you got big ones and little ones, and career choices. Just tons of them. Every day you got a choice to make, and you don't think of it that way. But if you think of whatever you do, are you going to honor God? And I think it's Colossians 3:23. Whatever you do, do it to the Lord and not to man, because God is the example or the choice that you should make and how you deal with it.
Hello guys, welcome back to the Bible Life Builders YouTube channel. And today I've got a very special guest, a gentleman who has been a Christian for many years now and has a wealth of knowledge. Every time he gets a chance to talk, the room usually gets very quiet to listen to the wisdom he has to impart. And he's going to share his testimony with us today, a life of struggles, ups and downs, but also a story of God's prevailing will in his life. So without further ado, this is Fred, affectionately called Coach by many people. I've picked that up myself. For a long time, I did not know your name was Fred. I thought you were just Coach. But
Yeah.
Coach, tell us a little bit about yourself. Who are you? What you do? Why did you earn the name Coach? We'll start there.
Well, this goes a long back. First of all, I'm 92 years old. I'll be 93 August 1st. And that's a long time. And I met my wife at William Jewell College, where I went to school. And she was a year younger than I was, from Chicago. And we got married in between my senior years as a semester. And she passed away a couple of years ago in March 16th, and we were married 69 years, and we have 5 children, adults now, and three girls, 2 boys, and our oldest daughter, Susan, turned 70 this past February, and our youngest daughter, Peggy, is going to be 62 in July. So Mom and Dad she didn't quite make it to the 90s, but I'm in the 90s. So got a family, and while we're talking, we moved around a little bit when we were in West Plains. 4 of the kids accepted Christ at that time, and that was probably one of the best stop we had, because everything seemed to go well. The spiritual, the school, the coaching, good place to grow the kids up, and that was good. And then our youngest daughter, she accepted Christ after we moved to Blue Springs.
And how long have you been in the Blue Springs area?
We moved there in 1972. So it's been...
Someone can do the math for us. I'll put it in post.
Okay. We bounced around a little bit. I went, after graduating, I went to service a couple of years, and then came out and went to Liberty. I was assistant coach there for 3 years, and then went up to Monroe City near Hannibal, and started varsity football. That was in 1960. We were there 5 years, went down to West Plains for 7 years, and then we moved up to Blue Springs in '72 and lived there ever since. And I did continue coaching. I retired from Missouri and then went over to with 31 years and went to Shawnee Mission South and was there 11, retired from Kansas and finished up at a parochial school in Independence St. Mary's, and they've since closed, and that was my first experience at a Catholic school, and it was an interesting 4 years there, and then I did a lot of volunteering things and after 2001, and just continued to move on, and each phase of our life is sort of a new adventure, and now I'm a widower, and I always say that we're on common ground, the widow and the widower at night. That's when nobody's there and can't talk to each other or disagree or and that's those times. But knowing the Lord changes the whole thing around, and we're just sojourners moving through, and that we don't know when our time's going to come, but that life cycle is going to touch everybody.
Absolutely. Let's talk about the before. And the before is going to be very early on for you. What age did you accept Christ as?
Well, that's interesting. At church, it's about a month ago, I think, that Randy, our choir director, is entering there, and he asked me if I would give my testimony, and also a couple of things that when Jesus, you had to lean on the rock, and I told him I would do that, and it was sort of interesting. When I did that, excuse me, when I accepted Christ at age 8, and if I can remember, Randy wanted me to do it in 3 minutes, and I told him, I said, how can I do 92 years in 3 minutes? But anyway, I went back and I from the start. And in 1941, I got my first dog, and I was 7.5, and that was in March, I believe, of that year, and named him Cinder, and sort of a lab and a good dog. And then my birthday was August 1st, 41. I turned 8 then. And a couple weeks after that, I accepted Christ at Garfield Baptist Church in Kansas City. And I can remember going down the aisle and crying, and didn't understand a lot of things, at 8, but I did understand some key things. And of course, John 3:16 was the verse that impressed me the most, and I was able to really to understand the life cycle, birth, dying, heaven, hell, with God, without God, and those are basic things. But I always sort of a shy person, and used to watch people, how they reacted and things that they would do. And you can get a lot of experience like that. You can pick up, the good, the bad, and the ugly, and it sort of helps you going along. And the thing about it, I grew up in a different era completely. My sister was 4 years older, and she was born in 29, and I was born in 33. So we're Depression babies, and people didn't have very much. It was pretty tough at that time, and so that was the interesting thing when I accepted Christ. And then the big thing of that same year in 41, December the 7th, Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor, and we were in World War too. And I really, as I was doing that testimony, it even brought tears to my eyes when I was doing that part of it. And thinking back, a lot of kids don't understand. We've been very fortunate that we've never had a conflict that we've been involved with in our country other than Civil War. And that makes a lot of difference. We don't know that bad side of it like the other countries. And but anyway, everybody got involved in that, and you either were on the battlefront or you're on the home front. And we did a lot of things. Victory gardens, they had air raid deals. You wonder, well, why would that? They're not going to bomb us over here and everything. And locally on Missouri, within 100 miles, 125, we had 7 facilities that definitely would be ones they'd want to bomb. And then the other thing that came along, the atomic bomb, and there was a lot of fear, a lot of anger. I could see that in that. The movies that we went to, they always had news deal, and RKO was really did a good job, and boy, they just show things you don't want to see, and so it's sort of ugly. A war is not any good, and so we grew up that time, and outside we played games. Most of them were war games and this kind of thing. And in school, we were trying to collect money for U.S. bonds and metal and all those kind of things. So everybody was involved in it. And but I also saw that it brought a lot of people, because I remember when we went to church that day, and we didn't have the radio on. And we didn't know that they had bombed Pearl Harbor until we got to church. Mm-hmm. And they didn't have a sermon. We had a prayer time for that whole situation. And so that was a very big year. Had, of course, accepting Christ, and then you got the war, and I got my dog, and, and it just... it was a time where it changed the whole country, but we unified real well, and we ended up, we were able to defeat the Axis powers, and then the next thing comes along, just how that cycle up and down, and it goes from there.
Wow, that's the truth of the fact that chaos brings people together is the tie that seems to string through time in of itself there. And I just personally, not nearly as much experience as you, but I am old enough to remember the 9/11 attacks.
Yeah.
And the teachers running around outside of our classrooms in panic, like the tears, and I'm sitting there watching like, what are you guys doing? Like, what is going on here? And they come in and they kind of tell us what's going on. I was just like first grade, I believe. So vaguely old enough, and just the chaos in that. And we weren't going to church ourselves at that point, but just I remember my mom, my grandparents, like watching my grandma be upset about that. Like that stuck with me. So definitely chaos points people towards Christ.
Well, I might mention my mom was the Christian warrior in her family. Dad didn't accept Christ till he was adult, 50 probably, somewhere in there range, and it just Mom read to me a lot, and my sister, sometimes she was sort of the rebel that you'd think the boy would be the rebel, but she was, but we all ended up knowing Christ, and I just was very fortunate to go to the church was right down the corner. We lived in the middle of the block, and the grade school was across the street, and we had playgrounds to play on and vacant lots and all those kind of things. And it was a good time to grow up. And the old song Downtown, that was very true, writing it, because everything was downtown. There were no malls or anything like that. And we did have a corner drugstore and a grocery store, which is about 5 blocks away. But we had everything we needed. But if you had to go to the doctor or buy clothing or whatever, you had to go downtown. And we had a great transit system. At that time, if I remember right, Kansas City was the 3rd best transportation city in the country. And we had trolley, the gas bus, and streetcar. And took you all over movies were a nickel. And it cost you a nickel or a dime to ride the transit, and it just, of course, the dollar was worth more, and that's a sad thing, our economy and all those things, but it sort of goes along with changes. And,
yeah, so true. Let's flash forward a few years here, go from your young childhood, maybe let's make a quick stop at your teenage years, your high school years.
Okay.
Walk us through Fred at that point. What decisions were going on? What things were you wrestling with? Give us a quick view.
Well, here's the deal. The guys in my Sunday school class, there were about 6 of us, 6, maybe 7, and most of us had all different interests. I was probably the only one that really was interested in sports. So, you have to be careful who you select as your friends. As growing up, peer groups can really make it tough on you. But you have to learn, and I think you have to learn pretty quickly. It works better, I think, if you understand that what the world is, and you got to live in it, but you don't have to become part of it. So if you got a standard, a biblical foundation, and you believe that, you shouldn't compromise. Compromise is very rarely is compromise good. I mean, it sort of solves it temporarily, or just doesn't answer the full question. But I think my group was real good. I mean, those guys had other interests, which was good because it widened my attitude towards things. And then as you grow up and you get out of grade school, you're going to high school, well, you start thinking about what you want to do, and that puts you in a different direction than your friends. And so pretty soon you get up there and you're associating with people that are going in your direction maybe a little bit more. And I was with groups that sometimes I knew something was gonna happen. It shouldn't. But ironically, it seemed like the teachers, even though it was a big school, at that time there was only 8 schools in Kansas City, public school system, and North Kansas City, Raytown, and William Christman. So those are the only 3 schools other than the city schools. And so we had, there was 313 in my graduating class in high school. So that was pretty good size for back then, in '51. And I just in sports, I always thought, coach tells you not to train and this type of thing. Of course, we got a lot of guys, that drink and party around and those kind of things. And I did not. I was with them sometimes if I happened to be a designated driver, but I didn't enjoy that. And most of the time, they didn't enjoy having me around because I was sort of a deadbeat, and didn't want to do the things that they did. And so that making decisions like that was hard, but yet, I have a Heavenly Father, and that's the most important. And even though good parents, but still I have to answer to my Heavenly Father. And, I represent Him. We did have on the curtain on our stage that we had in high school, had up at the top of it across there was "Remember Who You Are." And I always liked that because, when you do something, it reflects on your family, your friends, your school, your work, whatever you're doing, and people look at you and, and so you have to be careful if you're there. And, but not going into detail on it, but the teachers and especially administration when I was in high school, he'd call me in. The vice principal was always a disciplinarian, but we had a good relationship. And he would ask me, he'd sit down and said, "Fred, would you mind talking to your guys that you know and see if you can help this situation out?" And so, and I could tell a bunch of stories, but, but there's something about it. They respected that. And so anyway, I knew probably when I was in the fourth grade, I wanted to coach and teach. And so I didn't have a problem with that. The only trouble was sometimes that was more important than my books and read, and I wasn't as good a student as I could have been. But it all worked out, and I could. Well, we'll get into that maybe later on the kids and stuff growing up, but. I don't know if did that cover what you want to know.
I'm just asking questions and letting you run with it.
Yeah.
We're gonna be chunking this up, I think, by age more than
Okay.
our normal questions because we're kind of on that path. So let's keep rolling there. Let's keep moving forward. Let's look at college life. So I've heard a couple of your college stories, and you mentioned in the beginning here that you met your wife in college. So kind of maybe go freshman year up through your senior year and some big events and see how God's worked in that stuff.
Well, you got to remember there was no cell phones, anything like this. Oh, and I might go back. When we were growing up, we played outside all the time, and the radio had mysteries on Sundays. I don't know why. Sunday afternoon was a good time to listen to all the radio. They usually were 30 minutes. And we come over in church, and Dad traveled all the time, and he was gone quite a bit. But when he was home, we'd come home and turn the radio on at 1 o'clock, and he said, well, you can listen for a couple hours and then get outside and do something. So they didn't let us watch or listen to the radio, just like taking television away from you. Mm-hmm. And so those were just... little things like that, but so now coming back, I went through a little bit of the recruiting thing, and that was sort of interesting. My heart was broken a lot of times. I went to some of the colleges, and I didn't. I don't know why, because we had a lot of guys on our team didn't train, and sure enough, you look up some of those college kids, and you go on campus, and they're just wilder than March Hare, and so
that has not changed one bit.
No, it hasn't. And so anyway, ended up going to William Jewell, and at that time it was Baptist related school, and we won't go into the history of that. That's really changed. But anyway, so I wanted to play more than I could have probably gone to a big school and maybe done punting only and kicking but
What sport did you play?
football. Football was the primary sport. I ended up when I went to college. Football and baseball were my two best sports, and I was able to letter all 4 years in both sports at college level, and I was a captain in football in high school, and I was one captain in college, and so had some responsibility to do that, but when I got to college and finally after going through the recruiting thing and seeing that, and I don't think that you can find any college that is doesn't have some problems. And people are people, students are students, and when they want to do something, they do whatever they want to do, and so anyway, that was good. But at that time at Jewel, they had a lot of things because you could come out with a ministerial degree, and I know a lot of them were, preaching on weekends as an interim and substitute and those kind of things to get experience. And we had a religious focus week, which I thought was really good. We contacted people in the business world and their careers, and they would come to the college during the week, and they would talk to classes, sororities, fraternities, athletic teams, just about anything, and they would share how they do their Christian principles in their career. And I thought that was really good because especially, that they'd come into fraternity or facility, and you got all the boys there, and of course boys are going to ask different questions than girls, but it really was a good week, and they had a lot of activities like that, and so but getting back to your original question, I did meet my wife, and she was cheerleader and from Chicago, and we got to dating, and an interesting thing that this probably coming a little bit later too, but I met her mom, came up for homecoming, and then in between my sophomore year, I went up a weekend during the summer and met her dad, saw her mom one other time, and then the next thing, Shirley writes a letter that we want to get married. So I've got that letter, and her mom was sort of shocked. We weren't ready for this, and she said, "I think we'll just have to rely on your decision and hope that Fred's the one that works out." So 69 years later, it worked out pretty good, but it's sort of unheard of, 3 times. Only met the dad once, and he was a brilliant guy, played the piano, and we had no interest. I had trouble talking to him.
No common interest there.
He lost his job. He was a museum curator, and he lost his job at age 50, so he decides to go to school. He hadn't been to college, and he gets his undergraduate and graduate degree in 3 years in English, and of course that tells you. And then he started teaching at college level at So, and the interesting thing on our dad, the draft system, if you were 35, you were ineligible. And he got drafted one day before his birthday. He was 34, 364 days, and he had to go to service. So, sometimes those things are not fair, but it all worked out.
Yeah, we could probably go on a tangent about draft systems and stuff like that. I did a lot of research for my own family about my grandparents.
Well, along that, I did get called twice. The Korean War was in progress, and I was able to finish my degree, and then I got drafted probably about, I went in September. I graduated in May, so 4 months later, and well,
Well, that will kind of lead us into that next area of topic. Let's talk about after college. What did that look like for you and your wife? What things happened? Bring us up maybe a couple years, and then we can start talking about kids.
Well, I mentioned that we started when we got serious. I don't know. We started talking a little serious, probably quicker than we should have, and but we used to talk about just everything you could think of, from careers to kids to religion, just trying to talk about everything that's going to come up. Now, I don't know, what percentage it is, but there's a lot of folks that they just get married and they just look at sexual attraction, or there's we always heard marriage was 50-50 proposition, but somebody stopped me one time and said it's not 50-50, it's 100-100. and so you have to, it is a learning process. All of a sudden you're with someone, and you just have to learn to live together, and there's a lot to that, because you got things you want to do, and you now you got to do things together, and that's another thing we were interested. They didn't have Title IX didn't come along till '72, and so this was '52, and it just didn't give her a chance. She would have been a good athlete. They had a couple of intramural type things that they do in the conference and get together, and she would have been a good basketball player. One weekend she was high scorer for the tournament, and she was a good ping pong player, and we did crazy things. We'd be on a date and we'd go run the track and stuff like that, and so anyway, that got us up. But we talked about everything, and of course the humorous thing was we talked about children, and she said 6, and I said 5. So after we had our 5th one, she said, "I think your 5's better than 6." So
me and my wife, we're like 4 kids, and we're on 2 now. Like we're done.
Yeah, and they came along real quick. We had 5 kids in 8 years, and so I'm 30 and she's 29. So just put yourself at that role with all the kids, and there was some financial issues, that's for sure. But anyway, I got through college and went into service, and that. I didn't have to go overseas because the war had ended. Some did go overseas, but I didn't have to, and so I could live off base, and she got to live with me, and so we had our first child while I was there, and I just went from there.
Maybe diving into that a little bit deeper. How did you see God kind of working in that time span of after the college, the struggle? Because I get it. Kids are expensive. There's a lot going on with that. Getting called into the draft. What processes were you seeing work there? How do you see God working with the power of hindsight of 60 years or 70 years of hindsight? What can you look back and say, oh yeah, God was working here?
Well, I failed to mention in high school, I was, parents wanted me in church every time doors were open. Give you one example. We didn't have any sports like I mentioned, and one Baptist church in town, Bales Baptist, had the only gymnasium in Kansas City area for churches. And it was a nice gym and everything, so some of the churches had a basketball program. And I knew a couple of guys, that on their church were having. So I said, what would it take to play? So you'd have to go twice a month to qualify, that's not. So I went, and I went 2 weeks to that church, and I wasn't getting anything out of it. So I quit going. So I didn't play basketball. And that was a decision to make. And I don't want to sound like I'm always making the right decision. It's like I was more absorbed in, if I was with the guys, I knew something was going to happen, and so I usually tried to avoid it before it happens. If you're not there, nobody can say, well, he does it, or, and that kind of thing. And probably wasn't as outgoing as far as evangelistic, but behavior, your lifestyle, they could see things that were there. And I noticed when I went back for the first class reunion, that was 5 years, and the comments that my classmates made to me, I thought then, man, I really messed up because I didn't go far enough to share Christ like I should have. At that time, when I accepted Christ in that, it was a little more hellfire and brimstone type preaching. And maybe you look at that a little different. I've heard some people say that scare tactic, and I didn't treat it that way. Like I said earlier, when you see God's creation and what He has in store and how we flubbed the dubs, sort of Adam and Eve, and that those kind of things. So. And I read my Bible all the time, but, it wasn't as in-depth. I've never been a good reader for some reason. I just haven't been. And so that's been a weakness that I've had, and I just worried about that when I was going to go into teaching, because of spelling and pronunciation and that kind of thing. I thought, man, and so I had to pretty much put things on the board before class so I could teach, without thinking and writing up there, because I knew if I'd start writing and talking and everything, I'd spell it wrong. And so anyway, just little things like that. But in the service, what they offered for that was not real deep, but it had to be pretty broad because you got a lot of different people. And
are you talking like the chaplain?
Yes, yeah. And then they're restricted now on what they can say. You can't even read what the Bible says. They don't want you to do that. So now what do you do? There comes the compromise. I mentioned that earlier, and that's sometimes you got to draw the line, and you either just get on one side or the other, and you can't straddle the fence. And so that and I read my Bible. A lot of times they have lights out. I'd be sitting in the hallway on the stairs reading Bible, and then sometimes I'd be reading it, where other guys could see what and every once in a while they'd ask something, and so I just wasn't as outgoing as I should be about sharing Jesus, and so that was basically what I was doing. It was, I think there are ways that you can see somebody's how they live, and I've always said that probably it takes a little longer maybe to see my style. Think everybody's good, don't have any, and sometimes I've gotten the bad end because I've trusted people too much and think they don't do anything wrong, and you know how that is.
I tell people all the time the best testimony that we can share as Christians oftentimes is just the way we live our lives. Because people are watching, like they know, I know Fred reads his Bible. I'm going to just watch him and see how he reacts to stuff. And it sounds like you're kind of in that same boat as me. Like that's really effective. Telling him just what's in the Word is effective too.
Yep.
But just living your life in a way that reflects Christ is so powerful. And as Christians, we need to be better at that as a whole, for sure.
Well, there's two ways to do it, and I think you need to, I don't know, tactful is the right word, but there's a time and a place that sometimes what you say, sometimes it needs to be firm. I think sometimes we sugarcoat things too much, trying to say that everything's good, and when it's not, and and you have to understand. I just don't understand how people can this credit card debt stuff. I grew up in a tougher time, so I appreciated what little money we could get. You didn't waste it, and if you don't have it, you can't buy it. You shouldn't buy it. We'll put it that way. But the old credit card has gotten so many people in trouble, and it just that changed your whole life around. You got that worry on that, and that's not an easy thing to get rid of. So.
No, that's very true, and that could be another
Yep.
another lesson maybe with Fred, credit card debt. But you mentioned the idea of a time to be loving and a time to be firm. And being on the younger end of a parent than you are, you can probably impart some wisdom on me. I feel like with kids, there's a time to be loving and a time to be firm. So maybe walk us through some of your child raising years and some struggles there and some ways you saw God work.
Well, I've always I tried to coach the way I brought the kids up, and try to treat everyone fair, not putting one above the other. Same thing in coaching. You've got the star athlete. I think he should do the things that the last player on the team does. Now, somebody say, well, that's not fair because the good player does everything. Well, they don't ever all the time do the things that you want them to do. And they're an example out there. And if they get away with things, I've always felt like that's not fair. If they don't have to do the tough stuff during the week, they're not learning anything. And that was one thing probably I could have won some more ball games if, and maybe I had a little bit of stubbornness with me too. But if I ask you to do something, I expect you to try to do that, because I'm not going to ask you to do something that's not right. And you may not like the way that we're going to go through it, but you need to go with your superior, or whether teacher, parent, your boss at work. If you disagree or don't want to do anything that they say, well, then you need to move on to something else. And I think it's a privilege to to go to school, and so many kids now. Well, it just sort of changed. That's why we have more homeschooling now. I think my biggest deal on on what happens is that the parents aren't supporting their kids. If they don't have reading skills when they start kindergarten, they're behind, and a higher percentage don't catch up, and just little things like that. So as a parent, I think you need to do those things that always. Excuse me. Luke 2:52. Jesus increased in wisdom, stature, and favor with God and man. So those are three things that all of us are going to do. Now, from that point on to that scripture, it didn't tell us any more about his teenage. It jumps over that. I am looking forward to finding out how he dealt with his peer people as he was growing up. I'm sure there's probably some outstanding messages that could come from that. I think that would be a really interesting book to read if you could have that. But I think I just think it important part.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. And as a parent, as someone whose wife is in the education system, so often you just see parents, I don't want to say they abandon their kids, but they don't put the same emphasis that I feel like my mom put when I was a kid on school. Like, you get a chance to go to school, you get a chance to learn, you get a chance to be effective as a teacher or as a student, and like what you get out of that is what you are putting into it. And my mom, if a teacher called them and said, "Hey, your kid's struggling," which I struggled a lot. I was not a good student. I struggled to read. I struggled to speak sometimes, all of it. And it was on me to get that right. And my mom was like, "You got to figure this out. Let's work on it." She would make me do spelling like lists for hours. I still can't spell, but I learned a bit of discipline in doing that. And it's just that support system, it doesn't seem to be there. Like, now if a teacher calls a parent to tell them something's wrong, well, it's the teacher's fault for not teaching their kid. And it's like, it's got to be from both avenues. We're not fighting each other here. We're trying to help the student, and it just seems like it's parents against teachers instead of parents working with teachers. But that's another subject.
Yeah, in our family, everybody does discipline a different way. Discipline, I mean, you can pick the Bible up, and you've got a lot of scriptures in there that tells how God's going to discipline you, and if He doesn't discipline, then you're not ironclad or whatever you want to call it. But and so like the Israelites, they were up and down and up and down, and Lord got angry with them a lot, and He punished them, and so discipline is important, because if you just leave it up to freedom, there's no such thing as pure freedom, really. There has to be some rules and regulations, people to get along. And so biblically, you can just go through and just see what happens when you stub your toe. Sometimes it's accidental, but most of the time it's your choice. And but in regards to discipline on family, and I was trying to get on coaching, I just tried to do it the same way. And, if I ask you to do something and you don't, then it needs to be done something. Now, discipline can be done in a lot of different ways. And I know spanking, that's a no-no nowadays. And but I never got really spanked. Of course, like I told you earlier, I didn't really do a lot to get my parents angry at me either. My sister did, but And so she
You
suffered.
learned from her example.
Yeah, that goes back to what I said. I used to like to watch people, and you can just watch your own peer people. The ones that are in trouble all the time. Well, they probably deserved it. And I think I grew up at a time when if we did something wrong, we fessed up with it. And for me, I know some people will disagree on that, but when I dealt with discipline in school, especially I was in high school most all the time, occasionally middle school, but not much. I found that the person that was troublemaker, they were sort of proud of that, and they would tell you, "Yeah, I did that." And you get somebody that doesn't say a lot, and they do something wrong, and they're trying to figure a way to get out of it, and they'll do more lying and making up stories and stuff, to justify what they did. And I can see the difference between that. So I usually got along pretty well with the bad guy, so to speak, and got to know them a little bit. I think you really need to try to understand people at all ages and what their background is, where they come from. Some kids, they've got 2 strikes against them. Their dad's an alcoholic. They're divorced. You're a one-parent family. You don't have anything. You don't have any money to get some good things, and so it's. I did paddle the kids sometimes, and give you one quick example. When we moved to Monroe City, that first head job I got, we lived on the rented a house. It was the first house coming in off of 36 Highway. How far do you think a car will go before it gets the speed limit coming off the highway? Usually it's probably a couple of miles before you start slowing down. They're coming in, flying in there. Well, we were on the corner, and I was at school and came home in between practices, and Shirley seemed, oh man, I said, what happened? And she said, well, we couldn't find Sally. That was our second oldest daughter, and she was probably a year and a half old, something like that, just toddling around, And she said there was a machine shop next to us, and she went over and talked to them, and they were all worried. They thought maybe somebody had got them with a tractor or something, and so they started looking, and we lived near a field, and they were looking all over and everything, and Shirley goes out the front door, and Sally's sitting on the center line of the highway. Now, I don't know if any cars came by. If they did, the good Lord just didn't have them hit her, and probably no cars came by. But anyway, the danger of that. So I asked Shirley. I said, "What did you do?" Well, see, we agreed that you need to discipline the child right then. Don't wait till Dad comes home, because that makes it seem like Dad's the only one that disciplines. So it's good. I said, "What did you do?" And she says, I lightly paddled her on her diaper. Well, a 2-inch diaper, if you just paddle them, all you got to do is just sort of touch them like that, and they start crying. Yeah. But anyway, she said, I was just so thankful. I didn't want to do anything, but she said, I knew I had to do something. And so we didn't do much at 1 year old. But then Sally, later on, to tell you what, we had a stove. It was just a rent house, and it would the flame wouldn't ignite. It sort of would take 10 seconds and go on there, and so it was really dangerous. And so anyway, Sally had to deal, she was going up and turning on the gas. And so we were into breakfast, and she's going over there, and she went to touch it. I said, no, you can't do that. She went back and touched it again. So I just took her hand, and I just tapped it with a couple fingers, and she starts to cry and everything, and so the next morning, she's in the room there, and she starts over towards the stove. And so Shirley and I are looking at each other, and she gets over there, and she looks at it, and she raised her hand a little bit, and she put it down and walked away. So I think she remembered. And all I did was two fingers and just tap her on that. It doesn't have to be, but our kids, they talk about it, and they all get together, which isn't much anymore, but they talk about discipline. That didn't bother me, and all that kind of stuff. So they remembered it, and hopefully they use some of that strategy on their kids.
Well, I mean, I think there's a difference between beating your child and disciplining your child.
Yeah.
And there's been a couple of times when Adeline's done something, and we've, like you said, paddled her diaper. She's got, that diaper's that thick. She's not going to feel anything, but it's just the act of, I need to stop doing this.
Yeah.
She was jumping on the couch. Like, stop. Like, that's not safe. If you want to jump, we can get stuff set up for you to jump on. But it's just little things like that sometimes you have to be a little mean so your kid doesn't hurt themselves, is what is coming from. And that's a whole thing. And I think that's a philosophy for life. Being a coach, you have to be a little mean sometimes to even your star player, so they have the discipline to do what they need to do when the game time comes. I think we need to be a little mean to our Chiefs players sometimes with the way they tackle at times, but that's not here or there.
Well, we get on a story on that. Yeah, they've changed the rules on tackling. So,
Yeah,
but we won't go in that today.
Yes, that's something else.
It's hard to coach millionaires. I don't know how you do that.
I don't know.
They're making millions of dollars more than you are, and you're telling them what to do, and if they don't feel like doing it, I think sometimes they tell the coach, I ain't going to do it.
And I feel like you can see the players who are
Mm-hmm.
like that too.
Oh, yeah.
They'll come in, they're playing really hot, they're playing great, and then as their career progresses, they just slowly fall
Mm-hmm.
off.
Yep.
And I think it comes down to a lack of discipline. It's not an age thing, it's a discipline thing. And you can see the players who are consistent throughout their career. And I think it just comes down to being disciplined and listening to those people who have authority or a position over you to make you better, to draw you to be better. Yeah, and that's not here or there, but that is something I think is very noticeable.
Might mention one other thing, just sort of going back, language. I've always tell everybody, if you go on the playground of fourth graders and just had a mic out there listening, you would be shocked at some of the things you hear. And you say, where did they learn that? Well, probably at home would be number one. And then other people they've been around. And generally they say something they don't even know what it means or something. They're just, that's the word that's been used frequently, and they don't have any idea what it's like. And so there's another thing. And growing up at our house, there was no alcohol. Never saw any alcohol. My parents never. I don't recall Dad ever. Maybe a hill or dam, something like that. But I don't recall really doing that. I was very fortunate. My college or high school coaches didn't swear. My college coaches didn't. I just thought that was something that you didn't do. And but a lot of players, you get in the work environment where language is, you pick it up and you don't realize what you're saying, and especially what's bad is using the Lord's name in vain. I can live with some of the trash, but that hurts when somebody uses the Lord in that way. And so, anyway, that was something that stuck with me. And I'm reverting back, but again, on Virgin, I had two uncles that died alcoholics. I had my dad died of lung cancer. He smoked cigars. I had a cousin that committed suicide, and all these things was while I was growing up, and the alcohol is, and so I didn't see anything good in alcohol. And I did try it. I know that sound. Oh, you tried it? Yeah, I did. But I think the Lord put. None of it ever tasted good, And my sister was very instrumental on me not smoking. She made me inhale one time, and oh my gosh! So that ended that. I said, I'm going through that if I got to learn to like it. So, say, well, you said you tried it. And I'll fast forward it. And when I was teaching health, kids would wonder. I remember going in one day, and they were always talking about what they did on the weekend, And I came in one time, and I said, well, I just had all kinds of fun this week. I just went and we sat around and used LSD and watched the blinds wave in the water and all that stuff. I said, isn't that thrilling that you would go and do that? And, and just things like that. And one other thing I did in teaching that I felt comfortable with, kids would ask sometimes, what do you think of a situation? So I would stop the class and said, did you hear what they said? Your opinion. I said, this isn't from the book that you've got in front of you. It's my opinion. So don't go home and tell your folks that I'm teaching this. So I could share, I said, well, biblically, this that's not right. And so I think the kids accepted that, and either they wouldn't ask questions but they would sometimes, and so it's opportunities that you can slip in there that you can do, and I don't know, I got some real stories there that I could go in depth on. But one time when I was at Blue Springs, for an example, we had the phys ed office. It always had the open big glass that you could see what the kids are doing, and showering, dressing, and all that stuff, and no fights and what have you. And this one boy wore a cross all the time, I don't know. It hit me. I didn't even think about it. And I'm sure the Lord impressed on me to do it. And I went out there, and this kid, I said, why do you wear that cross? And he said, because Jesus Christ died on the cross to save me from my sins. And I said, you guys, did you hear what he said? And so I didn't have to say anything. And he did all the witnessing for it. And now, I'm sure the Lord had that plan that he was going to answer that way. but you just, hey, that was the best thing could happen. Came from one of the own peers and young guys. So just things like that. And one day when I was at West Plains coaching, and we were in the huddle. I was working with the offense there. I was down, and they were all huddled around me, and I looked down the grass, and there was a bee, a beetle, and a butterfly was in our huddle, one of those little white butterflies, you know. I said, we got 3 bees in our huddle. What are they? Oh, they're all looking, you know, what are you, nuts or something? And so you get a little humor with it. And then one other day you had one of those flash rains that comes through for about 10 minutes. And there was a big rainbow. And it ended on our tennis courts. And it wasn't too far away from where we practiced. So I said, hey, we're going to take time out. We're going to run over there to the end of the rainbow. And what do you get at the end of the rainbow? Pot of gold. Is it? And then what's the other thing, a rainbow? And one of them says, God said there would be no more flood. And so, you know, just things like that, how you can introduce that and everything. So, and then if you want to go in that direction, I got started with the Fellowship of Christian Athletes in 1969.
That was going to be my next question.
Okay. And that really helped out because you had a tool you could use. And we met, they called them huddle groups, and we met in different homes, and sometimes it'd be at school, but most time at the time, you know, it's more relaxed and you're away from the school environment. And I used to tell the guys, I said, this is not to get brownie points. If you come, I might have a prayer request that I would like for you guys to get for me. You may have one that we can pray for you. And I said, this is, we're going to have a scripture out of the Bible that will make the main topic for that week, and this is a spiritual time, not a playtime. I said, you know, after we're through, well, you know, we'll talk about sports and stuff, but that was the main goal. And boy, I've had some great stories that I could elaborate on that's worked out real well, and as we go, you might want to hear one or two of them. But so anyway, after I did that, it was sort of ironic. I was sitting in West Plains, and we were still taking a Kansas City paper. We just got hooked on that, you know, when we moved to Kansas City, and there was Fellowship of Christian Athletes. You know, they built their headquarters across from the Royal Stadium. And you have to remember, it's not just a local. That is a national headquarters and overseas and everything. And so anyway, I always thought, man, if I wouldn't mind going up and working with them, volunteering or doing something. And ironically, after I retired coaching, I went 7 years over at the main office, and there was 5 of us, and we called on the metro area, and I only had 11 schools, and I was just volunteered. They got some pay for it, but I didn't want any pay, and they gave me mileage. And so I said, well, you know, if they don't like what I'm doing, you can fire me. So anyway, it made it easier. But that was a great experience then, and I wasn't coaching, so I could put more time in with it, and so did that for 7 years, and so that was a continuation. But it was sort of ironic that I, you know, just daydreaming and looked to, well, maybe someday I can get up there, and the Lord eventually got me up that way. Of course, I was a Kansas City kid, and then my folks started having some health issues and all those things. You know how you want to get up closer to them and so on, and it we just go from there. If you
Well, really quickly on FCA and coaches' impacts in my life, to touch on the vastness of what you just spoke on. I had many coaches in my life. There's 2 of them that stood out to me. One, Coach Miller. He was just a pillar of consistency throughout my high school years. He was my cross-country coach, my pole vaulting coach, and he was just constant and consistent. My senior year, he was calling me out of class so we could go play chess. Just one of those type of teachers and coaches. And we just, I knew kind of his, just by the way he presented himself and carried himself, that he was a Christian. And one year we had a fall retreat with the church, and he went with us. And that was so cool to see him kind of be in that environment with us. That was really, really neat. And then speaking on FCA, like that was, we had FCA at our school. It was awesome. I wish I put more into it in hindsight than I did. I would just go on, I think it was Monday morning, which was a struggle. I wish I would have picked a different day of the week to do it, because Monday morning, I missed half of them. But they'd meet on Monday mornings. They'd have their huddles in the gymnasium. They'd have a speaker and stuff. And every once in a while I would speak, but I was still learning a lot. It's like I probably shouldn't be saying too much at this point in my life. I've got a lot to learn, but those two things, so Coach Miller and FCA, had a huge impact on my life. Just looking back as those two consistencies in my high school career that helped maybe keep me out of trouble or lead me the right way. It's hard to say which one they did more of, but definitely a hint back. So I'm sure looking back, there's many people who can say the same about you and what you've done in their lives. So definitely a good thing there.
Well, I'll give you a couple of them. When I was down at West Plains there, it was the second year that we had FCA going. And Bob Reasons, he came from a one-parent family. His mom, his dad was an alcoholic, and they split. And he was sort of an ornery kid, and he just, it was a tough situation at the home deal. And so we had FCA meeting at his close friend at his house, and he was sort of an ornery kid. And there was just 3 guys there and myself. And he accepted Christ that night. Well, went on, Bob, that was leading into, I think it was just before his senior year. And so when I came up to Blue Springs, it had been probably 7 years since I'd seen Bob. And I get a call one Sunday afternoon, and he said, "This is Bob Reasons." I said, "Bob, how you doing?" He said, "Well, before we talk," he said, "I just wanted to thank you for saving me from going to hell." And I said, "Well, I didn't do that, Bob." "Yeah, you were instrumental in it going." So anyway, I had the pleasure that class had their 55th reunion here a year ago, and went down, and Bob was gave the opening prayer and elaborated a little bit on that story, and so I mean, there's how many kids are going to say that you talk about a victory, that's like going undefeated, and yeah, and I've had some phone calls, and kids, and some of the stuff they've said and thanked and all that, and so I could list a lot of things, but I think as I've gotten older, I've gotten some feedback, and I don't know. I think a lot of times a person passes on, and they really don't know what some of the things you did, and I've lived long enough that some of them will have just come up and, "Boy, thanks for doing this and that and everything." And the last one I'll mention, it was really a good one. Bill Henry is the boy's name, and he went I was down at West Plains. Kids that graduated, a lot of them went went to a visit to Vietnam. And so in his letter he wrote half a page, typed it, and he said, "Coach," he said, "we don't know," he said, "I was over in Cambodia, And he said there were two non-coms working on me. And he said my belly button was on my left side. And he said it didn't look good, like I wasn't going to make it. And he said, I don't know. He said, we don't know what we'll think of when we're going to die. And he said, for some reason, I said, I thought Coach Merrill, what he said, life was important and how you need to help people. And he said, you didn't always use scriptures, but he said, you just actions. And he said, I looked at my non-coms and said, I'm going stateside and I'll send you a picture. And so he's a motivational speaker down that way. He does now. He's 77 or 78 now. So, and that just, gosh, there's just a lot of stories of kids that have passed. Almost like I went back to Monroe City, and I always call him my go-to guy. And he was 80 years old. He passed away, and it was really like a son. And so I went up to visitation on Friday, stayed overnight in the funeral, and I know I got to see some people. I didn't remember them, but they remembered me. And so as soon as they talked, got some good reactions there, but that teaching can be a wonderful profession, and it's like anything. There's a few glitches along the way, but most of the time we enjoyed doing that. And Shirley taught visually impaired, and there's some great stories with that. The two boys, they both finished out. They're retired from teaching and coaching. And I always like to tell people, between the three of us, we coached 105 years of football. So touched a lot of lives.
Wow, that's awesome. And those short little testimonies from the people that you've impacted is just so, just for me, that hits the hardest, because those are what we're called to do. Like, it's not our glory, it's not their glory, it's God's glory. But through them sharing that with you, it just reaffirms a little bit, like, yeah, what I'm doing is making an impact.
Yeah.
And those, like you mentioned, that's better than a winning season. That's better than going undefeated, because you've saved that person from hell. Not you, but like your faithfulness has led them to God.
You've exposed them to the
truth.
Yeah.
And
that's it.
That's so cool. We'll transition now into probably our last section here, and that's just going to be kind of retirement, and I'm going to call it legacy. What were retirement years like? And we talked a little bit about it, and we might circle back around to this idea of legacy at a different time. But just what are your thoughts on that? What's retirement looked like for you? I'm going to probably group in the loss of your wife here as well, and just what has God been doing in your life recently?
Well, I've always said, if you don't have your health at any age, life's not very much fun. Yeah. And that's a reality. We didn't have a lot of money, like I mentioned earlier. We knew that going into this profession was not one that makes a lot of money. Missouri has a great retirement situation, which works out beautifully. That's been good. I think the whole family, because the two boys, like I mentioned, went through the full cycle. We had one daughter that went 17 years in there, and then she worked with learning disability, and they just were piling on. She was down in Texas then, and just overwhelmed her. She had 75 kids during the day, and yeah, it just got, and so she decided I need to be a stay-home mom, and as far as Shirley, this jumping back, but one of the other things we talked about before we got married is she would not work until all the kids got in school. So at that time, that took 13 years before she did. And she ended up, she had a degree to teach, but she chose to be a teacher's aide. And she didn't really just want all that responsibility. And then she was off the same hours that the school was. So somebody was home when the kids came home, or after their activities or whatever they were involved with. And so that's the way we tried to handle that, and that worked out good. And so finally, she just was a teacher at her last 6 years, and the kids, after she passed away, at the funeral, I told the kids, I said, we'll all say something about Mom, and I said, you got 2 minutes. We're going to go by age, so I go first, and if I go over, why, I'm entitled to do that. So anyway, I said mine, and they all got up, and just everyone had a different deal, and it was so good that they pointed out. But one of the things they mentioned, they could hear her doing typing Braille typewriter about 3 hours every night. She was making lesson plans for teachers and stuff. And then when she started teaching, she had a great experience with one of them. She went on to KU, graduated in the top 10, and went to St. Louis and got, I don't know what company it was she was with, and she was way up there in administration in the company. And just so, the blind kid, so handicap can do things, and sometimes they're frowned upon, and sort of put off to the side, and it's been that way for years. So everybody thinks they can't do anything. And so anyway, we've all been pretty much as a family working with kids, like social worker, and so that's been good. And I think that's been worth so much. Like one son the other day, lives in Moore, Oklahoma. We usually talk every Sunday, and he just mentioned, he said, Dad, we didn't know we were poor. And so, when life is coming along good, you got the essentials. And I might drop back, I said I gave my testimony earlier, and a couple of the things that were hard that we leaned on. First one I mentioned was when we were at Monroe City. We had the 5 kids in 8 years, and financially it was tough. And we made it through those 5 years and left town, and everything was paid, and we only had about $6 in the checking account. And the movers were from West Plains, and he said, I wasn't going to get paid for a month there, and so I said, can I pay you when I get the money? And he said, yeah, that's good. So just things always worked out. The Lord provided, and we learned to live without having means. We learned to sacrifice, learned to appreciate what we had, and didn't have to have something that we thought we needed. And then I think we appreciated the 3 basic things: food, clothing, and shelter. And if you've got those 3, you really don't need a whole lot. And we had a lot of love and got closer to the Lord, and it just sort of went off from there. West Plains was probably the best spiritual situation that we were at, and so that came along, and then of course I mentioned the last thing. Shirley passed away, and the 5 kids came up and just did a wonderful job. And you asked me what moving on, and Of course, you don't have your spouse to go in there, but things started trailing off with her and her health, and it became. And I learned one thing, that probably one of the hardest thing is to be a caretaker. And man, there are some really tough, difficult stories that you can hear that one doesn't realize until you go through part of that. And we didn't have as much as some other people, but it's, when you do that marriage thing, it's for life. And sometimes you wonder if it's worth it. It's pretty tough, but I just can't understand a person that doesn't know Jesus living an enjoyable life.
Kind of two follow-up questions and maybe a statement. When we're living our life, we have highs and lows, and with a spouse that's with you there faithfully through those highs and those lows. I was a big on this in our marriage. When me and Jenna got married, we've only been married now, I believe it's 5 years. Now, if that's wrong, that's really embarrassing. But we, in our marriage ceremony, we made it a point of saying this is a marriage between me and Jenna, but also it is with the Lord. He is the focal point of this marriage. It's a triangle. We're at the base, and we're trying to get closer to Him, because we figured if we're drawing closer to God, then we're drawing closer to each other as well. And one of the things, they say in the marriage vows, for better or worse, well, sometimes the worst is fights or arguments, and sometimes the worst is sickness. And can you speak any more to that idea of just better and worse, and just drawing together closer as you guys grow closer or deeper in your faith walk, just kind of that element of that aspect?
Well, I think we were very fortunate. Well, for an example, to appreciate things, when we had 5 kids, they're all growing up in school. They were in West Plains, and we still didn't have, but we were on our way up to making ends meet a lot easier. And I told her, I'm sort of a nut on saving stuff. I've got about 5 pages for each year of income tax since 1950. The kids said, "What are you keeping those things for?" Well, every once in a while you have to refer back to something like that, and I can go back there and have just got the basic things that I need to refer to. And Peggy was our youngest, and she was the first one that had any physical problems, and she had scoliosis. And so she had what they call, at that time, it was a new surgery, and that was attaching a rod to your spine, and it wouldn't correct what you had on your curvature, but it would stabilize it so it stays the same. Well, she had a 27-degree curvature, and so I asked the doctor, "What if we don't do this?" And he said, "Well, she probably eventually will have at least 90-degree curvature." Now, when that would happen depends on the individual. He said it might come quickly, and it might drag out. Well, that's a no-brainer, So we did that, and just to show you how the other 4 kids, they wanted to go if she was going to have to go through the airport, because it would signal that she had some metal. And so that's how a lot of love, going in the family. And it's but we were real thankful about that. But at the time when the kids were really growing up there in West Plains, we didn't have any doctor bills to speak of. The only thing we do is paying for a premium through the school insurance. And we usually try to take care of that stuff ourselves, and not that we're doctors or anything, but, you got to learn. I had to learn something to deal with injuries on the football, stuff like that, and so anyway, they got, a little tougher as they grow up, and we didn't always sweet talk them and and that kind of thing. So it becomes you don't use your, if your Bible sits at home and you don't read it, you're not going to get anything out of it. And it's just like a class. If you don't put effort into your English, art, whatever class you're in, or athletics, or whatever career, you're not going to be as successful as you should or learn as much as you should. So it's just like that. And I think the one thing I failed to mention, when I got out of the service, this is when it really changed my direction for Christian growth. I was asked to teach Sunday school class, and I gave that stock answer, I don't know much and everything like that. I got home and I prayed about it, and there's no reason I can't take a class. So I had 7th graders, and I had the preacher's son. And I thought, he's going to go home and tell him how bad a teacher I am. He's just a 7th grader, and he's just like a typical boy, and, he was a good kid. Billy Link, he went on to have a good career and was in sports and in high school, and so, it's everybody is really a good person. Sometimes it takes a little longer to get the good out of that, and so that's sort of the way that we just tried to lead our life. And I think families got probably our biggest issue just recently. My youngest son, he'll be 65 in July. He had a stroke. So now you get down to, hey, we're getting a little more serious here, and so you never know what life's in store, and you look over and there's so many people that are suffering, and you just wonder what God's plan is there. I don't, and we don't know, but we are able to deal with it if we've got Jesus in our heart. It's it's like all our kids were healthy at birth, and get some that have physical ailments and just can't get around, and you just wonder how as they grow up, mom and dad are just loving and everything, and scriptures tell us that we'll only have so much that we can handle. It's not going to be something we can't handle. It might be something you don't want to do, but you're dealt a hand, and you got to go with it. And I've always said, no matter whether it's career, family, individual, or something, you try to make a good situation out of a bad situation. And you can do that if you got Jesus Christ in your heart.
Amen. There's so much truth in that. And the biblical principle of God never gives you more than you can handle. He gives you a lot. Sometimes it is more than you can handle alone. But that's the key, is you're not alone. You've got Jesus to lean on and to support you through it. And there's highs, there's lows.
Well, when I was with FCA, and this might be a good way to close out. We took pro athletes around to talk at assemblies at high schools and middle schools, and I was taking Rich Garza, who was a pro football player, and he only played 5 years. He moved around, he had some injuries and things, but he's got a Christian association or something down in Texas or something. He's really a great Christian guy, and we went around, and when I heard him open up his each talk, and I've used it a lot of times, and he would always start off with, he said that none of us are born winners and none of us are born losers, but we're all born choosers, and with choices come consequences. And that is so true. God didn't create puppets. He had a plan. He wanted a relationship between Adam and Eve, and they blew it. They started doing what they wanted to do, and so that trickled down to society, that we're all sinners when we're born, and it just we made that choice, but there's choices you make all the time. Just meaningless little is what kind of toothpaste you're going to use, and then do I have surgery for this cancer, or you got big ones and little ones, and career choices, just tons of them. Every day you got a choice to make, and you don't think of it that way. If you think of whatever you do, are you going to honor God? And I think it's Colossians 3:23. Whatever you do, do it to the Lord and not to man, because God is the example or the choice that you should make and how you deal with it. And
that is such a true statement and so well put. And I just want to thank you so much for your time today and being willing to talk we're almost at 2 hours. So there'll be some editing there, I'm sure, but it's such a honor for you to sit down and pack 92 years into 2 hours. And there's so much there. Just the through line for me, what I've been hearing is just consistency with God. And you didn't say this, so if I put words in your mouth, shut me down. But God using Fred, who I might be a little mean here, you aren't super impressive to look at. You seem like a normal guy, but to do great things and make a great impact. And that is so cool to see and witness and hear just what God has been doing and has done in your life. As a last closer, is there anything that you would say to the person seeking Christ or asking questions about Christ?
Well, I think, again, you sort of go back to your choices. It depends. Some people you talk to, they grew up in a spiritual home, and even Billy Graham Franklin, he strayed from the family for a couple of years, or maybe longer than that. Wrote a book about it, his life, and he finally came around. So it's not. I think a lot of times I don't want to do what I'm expected to do. I want to do something else on my own. The prodigal son's a good example. He wanted to get his money early and go do his thing, and he squandered everything, and then I had a better deal at home. And so he goes back, and his dad brought him back and just loved him and everything. And then they always don't go to the remainder of the story. And the older son, he says, well, how come he's getting all that? And his dad took him aside and said, "It's been here all the time."
Yeah.
And he just couldn't see it. And so if you're always looking at somebody else, that's a mistake. Don't try to be somebody you're not. And, if your old country guy doesn't say much, or a singer, but whatever you do it for Christ, and share that story if you can. I'm able to talk to people easier now than I did when I was growing up, because I can start off, just lost my wife. Oh, that's terrible, and then you start talking the marriage, 69 years. Oh, that's a lifetime. And then I accepted Christ at 8, really 8. And then you hear somebody say, well, I did it at 9. I did it at 23. So it's out there, and I think sometimes I just mentioned about reading the Bible, it becomes a more natural thing. If you have to force yourself to do something, you're not going to do a good job of it. And if you don't enjoy the work that you've got, you're going to be miserable. And if you're enjoying something, then it becomes part of it, and you want to share it with somebody. And especially if, this is very important for your life. We're talking about now, don't forget the future. I think as I've gotten older, and my wife going through, you get the question sometimes, well, do you fear death? Well, it's always an anxiety. I don't know how I'm going to die. I hope it's in my sleep. But, it may be a bad accident, or a sickness that goes on for 10 years. You hope those things don't happen, but you just don't know. But whatever a person's going to live, when I was a kid, I made this up. I don't know. I said, you're born to eat, you eat to live, and you live to die.
I've heard that before.
I don't even know. I don't think I heard it. But that's the way life is. And 30 seconds after you die, people are just going just like nothing happened. Now, your family and that, will be more, but you can be replaced at an instant. And we don't know. So I think that's the other thing that I've been able to understand down through life is that cycle. It's going to happen, and I've seen some bad things in our family, and just because somebody tells you it's good to do something, you don't have to do that. And you just got to make a choice. It goes back to choice. So there we go.
Wow, that's just such a statement. And you're right, it's our choices. Each day we get to make a choice of, it boils down to, are we going to follow and glorify God today, or are we going to live for our own ambitions and desires? And I hope the people listening to this and who are struggling with that make the choice to follow Christ. And I just want to thank you again, Fred, for coming on here and sharing and talking, and I might even go as far as preaching a little bit for us, and just laying out that lifelong testimony that you have to show your faithfulness from 8 years old all the way up to 92, and hopefully very many years to come. Fred is part of our men's planning committee, various other ministries in the church as well, and he's just a well of wisdom. And that's kind of where I'm going to open the floor now to some of you guys. if you've got questions for Fred, leave them in the comments, and I can ask him, and we can maybe do a follow-up video where you're answering some questions.
Yeah.
Also, this is kind of a unique situation. If you have a story with Fred of how he's impacted your life, I would love for you to share that, or maybe even record a video yourself talking about that, and we can compile something together to show all that, to just show kind of that legacy that I mentioned a couple of times, because we do leave a legacy in our lives, whether it's one that points back to Christ, or we're glorifying ourselves, or whatever that may be, good or bad. We have a legacy, and I believe just from talking with Fred and listening to his stories that he's got a great legacy. So my question for you is, what legacy are you leading? What legacy are you leaving behind? And what does that look like for you? Again, Fred, thank you so much for your time today. It's been an honor to host you and to listen to you. And I just pray that the people who are hearing this, have sat through this, are impacted as much as I've been just listening to your testimony.
Thank you.